Good morning. Today I'm going to talk about elements, specifically carbon and oxygen, and how they move through the Earth system. So how do they go from the atmosphere into the biosphere, or the biosphere into the geosphere? And there's different pathways to move these elements around. And that's what we've been talking about during this unit is photosynthesis and cell respiration and how they are responsible for moving carbon and oxygen around. So let's take a look at this image. And if you look at the image, it has several arrows showing different ways of moving um, carbon around. In these different in these different methods of moving carbon around, we see a couple of the processes that we've been talking about. So we have photosynthesis here. And you see photosynthesis, if you follow the arrow, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will go from being a gas and it will go into plants and get converted into food or sugars for the plants. However, the plant also has some pathways out for the carbon. In one case, we have carbon dioxide coming from the plant going back into the atmosphere. Because the plant is also going to be eating the food that it makes. It has to harvest energy from those sugars that it makes in photosynthesis. So it also breathes out CO2, small amounts of CO2, as it harvests energy from those sugars. The sugars from the plant can be stored in things like an apple or a potato or a carrot. And when we eat the plants or when an animal eats the plant, that carbon gets transferred from the plant to the animal just through the process of eating. That animal, let's say it's a human that's eaten a potato, that animal has to get the energy out of that potato and in the process creates CO2 or carbon dioxide, which we breathe back out, just like the plant did earlier. And we breathe this carbon dioxide out and it goes up into the atmosphere. So that's respiration, that's cell respiration and photosynthesis. We can see that there's some other things though going on too. We haven't really highlighted them in this particular unit, but you see when animals die and decompose, and when plants die and decompose, the carbon that's found in their bodies can be put into fossils or put into ground or the soil. This really should say more than fossils, right? This should also say soil because that's where some of that stuff's going to end up. Over time, those decomposed remains will turn into oil, coal, gas over millions of years. And these are the fossil fuels that we extract from the earth and we burn to get energy. That's combustion. That burning is combustion. When we burn the fossil fuels in a car or at a power plant, that puts CO2 back into the atmosphere. So what you should be seeing is this cycle. We're very concerned with respiration for this unit and photosynthesis for this unit. But there's a whole cycle going on, a recycling of elements and a recycling of these materials. Now let's take a look at oxygen. So with oxygen, we've linked oxygen to respiration. Um, we've talked about oxygen being produced during photosynthesis, but necessary for living things when they go through cell respiration. That's harvesting energy from their food. Um, And we need the oxygen as part of that process. So you see a much more simple loop here, a much more simple cycle. And let's start with the plants. And it says plants create oxygen with photosynthesis. Yes, we know that. Which is good right here. Oop, nope. And let me draw. So these plants have released oxygen into the atmosphere just as a byproduct of photosynthesis. That oxygen now can be used by animals and plants. Don't forget, plants are going to take in some oxygen too. And then they go through cell respiration. Oxygen is used during that in order to get energy from our foods. And a byproduct of cell respiration is carbon dioxide. They breathe it out. That carbon dioxide is then needed by the plants. Simple cycle, simple loop here, right? All right, so this is the last image that we have. And again, looking at oxygen, this gets a little bit more specific though, because I've already talked about photosynthesis producing oxygen. But let's look exactly at what the pathway is. So photosynthesis makes oxygen. That goes up into the atmosphere, O2. 2 oxygen atoms bound together. When that gets taken in during cell respiration here, so this is respiration, harvesting the energy, that oxygen is actually going to be linked into a water molecule. Okay, so that oxygen that we breathed in gets attached to a water molecule. The water molecule would need to eventually be used by plants during photosynthesis. And that water molecule actually serves a purpose during photosynthesis. But there's a second part to this. During photosynthesis, we said that a plant makes its own food, like sugars, and that's right here, organic molecule. That's a sugar right there. So photosynthesis is responsible for making that. The sugars are then eaten. They're either used by the plant for energy or they're eaten by an animal. And the carbon, you can see some carbon and some oxygen here that are eventually going to make up the CO2 molecule that we breathe out. And CO2 is essential for photosynthesis. That carbon from the CO2 is going to be necessary to make the sugar, which is our organic molecule. Very nice, neat loop. All right, thank you very much.